Excited. When I was CTO at a company called InView, I have a couple InView people in the house still. Yeah, awesome, thank you. I used to spend a lot of time talking about manufacturing, so much so that a lot of the software people that would work for me basically got sick and tired of hearing about manufacturing. And there was a lot of confusion at that time. Why are we always talking about this industrial application when we're a cool high-tech startup? And in fact, I had been trained as an engineer in the waterfall method of manufacturing, of software development, which is called, I was trained in it, it was called the manufacturing metaphor for development, where we would pass work in large batches from one silo to the next, from specification to design to implementation to QA. And you can imagine how pissed off I was when I found out they haven't done it that way in manufacturing in many years. So why are we copying this outdated model? So part of the mission of the conference is to help you see the connections between different ideas and to understand that Lean Startup didn't just arise spontaneously a few years ago, but it is based on foundations of other schools of thought that are much older. And our mission is to bring you, so you can hear firsthand directly from the people who were there in developing those ideas. So you heard from Kent Beck, you heard this morning from Steve Blank, and you're going to hear from our next speaker to talk about this connection to lean manufacturing. And in fact, the continuous deployment example you just saw is really a straightforward application of traditional lean concepts like flow, the and-on chord, Kanban, reducing batch size, to the factory, the design factory of software development. So it's a very important foundation in my own life. Now, to introduce our next speaker, I want you to imagine, some of you are old enough to remember, others have read about it in books. There was a time when Japanese management was a huge fad a few years ago. And a lot of people in America were very interested to learn about this fad. They were threatened. They made movies about it. They wrote about it. A lot of people interested in Japanese management. But so far as I know, only one person had the idea that they should up and move to Japan, teach themselves Japanese, and get themselves hired at a Japanese company so as to learn what Japanese management was. That same person ultimately wound up being hired by Toyota and helped bring what we now call lean manufacturing to the West and to the rest of the world. Please join me in welcoming the CEO of the Lean Enterprise Institute, John Shook.
Hello. Hello. So thank you, Eric. It's a pleasure to be here, I have to say. I get to do what one of my favorite things, which is talk about lean. I do it passionately but dispassionate, I think, at the same time to try to communicate accurately. And we've heard about things today, everything from fish shit to, my goodness, it's really been quite a ride. So Eric and I talked about what could I communicate with you that could be at least interesting and hopefully useful as well. And so I'll share my story, and hopefully you can find a couple of things in there that relate to your world, from Toyota City to Fremont, California, to you. To Eric's point, this term lean has been with us just for a while, 25 years exactly, actually. And in the fall of 1988, there was an article in the Sloan Management Review called The Triumph of Lean Production. And that's the first time we started using the word lean in that context. And a couple years later, there was a very influential book called The Machine That Changed the World. Some of you, at least some of the somewhat older ones, people in the audience, I think probably read that. They're very influential, and that's where the paradigm shift from mass production to lean production was laid out by a team of researchers at MIT who had spent 5 years and visiting every automobile factory in the world that they could get in, everyone in the Western world. And they decided they found something that was indeed unique, that one company had tremendously, radically better performance than all the others, and also it did things in a radically different way. So they said we should call it something. And they came up with the word lean production. And Jim Womack left MIT, did a spin-off to create the Lean Enterprise Institute, which I joined 3 years ago, as Eric mentioned. And this looks like a pretty adventurous crowd, I think. This photograph is actually of me. It may not look like I was in search of the world's best production and management systems, but I was. Believe me, there was a book called Japan is Number One. This is back in the mid-1970s. And it seems so, crazy now, but at that time, we really thought it was a Japanese thing. And I believed all the hype. I read the books. And when I graduated college, first time I went to Japan, I had never had a bite of sushi. I did not know the word konnichiwa. I knew nothing about Japan. When I graduated college, I had never spoken to a Japanese person. And I went over in the mid-'70s and said, this is really interesting, what's happening here. And I decided I wanted to work for the biggest, most Japanese company I could find. It took me a few years to be able to do that, and there I am. From having fun with the summer kimono and learning about the culture, now I'm working on an assembly line, because this is, at the end of the day, a learn-by-doing process. Not just reading books, not just coming to conferences, although this is wonderful, this is energizing, and you learn a lot, and you network. You learn through doing. And by coincidence, I landed in a place called Toyota City. All I wanted was the biggest, most Japanese company I could find. To me, Toyota was no different from Nissan. I actually liked Nissan cars better at the time. Don't tell our Toyota friends who were here yesterday. But Toyota certainly qualified as the biggest, most Japanese company. So I was very happy. And I was lucky to be hired because, as it turned out, as I found during those years, Japanese companies didn't hire foreigners. And I was knocking on doors all around the country. I was very determined at that time. By then, I knew a little bit of Japanese. I could get by. And only when I arrived at Toyota did someone say, yes, we will hire you. And I became the one person to work on the Pacific side, the other side of the Pacific, in Japan, on a joint venture that they had just signed an agreement with General Motors to create in Fremont, California, just about an hour here in the southeast corner of San Francisco Bay. And that became known as New United Motor Manufacturing, Inc., NUMI, and that kickstarted a revolution that I'm saying has led to us meeting here today. It was a tremendous learning opportunity for me. My learning curve was almost absolutely straight up. And when I arrived in Toyota City, it was then me and 70,000 Japanese trying to figure out how you would transfer this production management system overseas. They had never done it in a wholesale way before. And this system had been cooking, kind of a soup there in Toyota City for like 3 decades. A lot of influences from the US and elsewhere, and kind of in the rural area in Japan. All these tools that we've heard about and that you are learning and using were developed there. Kanban, one-piece flow, continuous flow, all those things. And I was very fortunate to be able to be there and learn about those. I'm not going to go through the details of them today, but to tell the story then of this joint venture. Toyota General Motors 50-50 joint venture. This is an old newspaper clipping from the, I think it was the San Jose newspaper from 1984. Old GM plant reborn with the NUMI startup. What we didn't know is it was the worst factory in the world. That's the building there, General Motors Assembly Plant. And when I say worst factory in the world, it was the certified worst factory in the world. There were 2 certifying authorities. One was General Motors, which this was the early 1980s. General Motors quality was horrible. And they would acknowledge that. I have many friends who are General Motors people. I'm not speaking out of school here. But they would acknowledge. So this was the worst plant in the entire GM system. So to be that bad, this was world-class bad. Additionally, it was the worst workforce in the entire GM system, maybe the worst workforce in the world, and the certifying authority was the United Auto Workers, UAW. The UAW themselves said, even we can't talk to these people. They're crazy. They would shut down the line, go out on wildcat strikes. They would intentionally sabotage quality. Can you imagine? Not only not building in quality, they would intentionally sabotage quality. And there they are. There they are. This is the first group of people. The dates there says June 1984. This is a group of UAW union workers just arrived in Toyota City to learn this production management system. And here's what happened. The punchline is that it went from the worst to the best. It didn't just improve 20% in productivity and quality by 50% or something like that. It went from the worst to the best. It set a record for the best quality score any GM plant had ever gotten in 1 year after a launch with the exact same workforce. And again, this is certified by the union. It's another newspaper clipping from August 1985, and you'll see the name there, Solidarity. It's the union newsletter. UAW members like the changes at GM Toyota's new venture and want the good feelings to last. So here we are. We had done a bit of a test and experiment on a pretty big scale, but it wasn't as big as what Toyota's competitors had done. This was a way to find out quickly, to answer some questions. Can we really make this work in the United States? And it proved that we did. And it became a very famous example. Many of you have read about it. Again, another article in the Sloan Management Review called How to Change a Culture, Lessons from NUMI. And another that you may have heard, it's an NPR radio show called This American Life. NUMI is a wonderful show. If you ever get a chance to a radio show, if you'd like to listen to it, you'll learn a lot, I think. But I often get this question, and I often ask myself this question, really. In fact, John just talked about culture as well. So how did you really change the culture at NUMMI? This was the worst workforce in the world. The same people who had been working there before, the same troublemakers, we hired back. Something a lot of people don't realize. The same troublemakers I was warned about. Oh, watch out for Gus Billy. He led the Wildcat Strike of 1977, set us back for 6 weeks. The same people were there, and I know I worked alongside with them. How did you do that? Well, I can't go into every detail today, but what I can say is, actually echoing John's observations, it's a management system with a social side, or you could say cultural side, and a technical side. You have to have both of those in equal measure, I'm going to say. It's a management system at the end of the day, in which we engage everyone in continuous problem finding and experimenting. We talk about continuous flow, continuous deployment, continuous flow of product, continuous experimenting. Problem finding by everyone in the organization. You may have heard, but I'll show you very briefly. This shows an assembly line. And if you look at an assembly line today, it looks much like what Henry Ford gave us exactly 100 years ago. That's another anniversary we have this year. 100 years of the assembly line. It looks basically the same on a drive-by. But if you look inside, you find that what Toyota did is turned it on its head in terms of responsibility, in terms of how to engage people, and how to engage workers. Engage everyone in continuous problem finding and experimenting. But that's easy to say. How do you actually do that? So what you'll find in this assembly line is a beautifully designed social and technical system. The technical system, it begins, in this case, the worker has 60 seconds to do a job. If you can see, the worker there has a furrowed brow because the worker is encountering a problem. And the worker knows exactly what to do, how to find a problem and what to do, which is to pull a rope, which is placed right overhead. And when pulling the rope, that'll light up a signboard and tell someone to come and help solve this problem within your cycle of work. Now, if you have 2,000 or so workers, that's quite a promise for a company to make. We're going to help you solve your problem within your cycle of work. Now, our General Motors friends at that time said they saw this system in Toyota City, and said, well, you're not going to bring that to Fremont, California, are you? And we said, yes, we are. And they said, they asked again, are you really sure that you're going to bring this to Fremont, California? And we said, yes, we are. And they said, well, you're crazy. You mean you're going to, when you pull that rope, if you can't solve the problem, the line will stop at the end of your job cycle. He said, you're going to give these workers the right to stop the line whenever they want to. And we said, yes. And they said, you don't have to give them a rope. They stop the line anyway. And we said, well, let's phrase it slightly differently. We're going to give everyone in the company the obligation to stop and identify whenever they see a problem. That's actually what we're here for. We're going to design a system that basically works. Our job then is for everyone to be finding problems and experimenting on what to do with them. We're going to make it easy to do every job right, hard to do wrong, easy to spot problems, and easy to do plan, do, check, act. Then we're going to support every single person in solving problems and to challenge everyone for continuous experimentation. Because problems happen everywhere all the time. This is a basic fundamental belief that I have come to have after all these years of doing this. They happen, what do we do with them? This is from the New York Times, and I think you can see this, this illustration shows that the surgeon may have made a mistake. And in fact, this is a real story, and I know the hospital where this occurred, where there was a wrong side surgery, where the patient woke up and looked down and saw that the knee was supposed to be operated on was the wrong knee. And as it turned out, one of the nurses in the operating room saw that there was something wrong, but she was afraid to challenge this very powerful and confident surgeon. And this happened. Now, this has changed surgical practice in the U.S. This happened some years ago. But in every case, in every instant, you can be assured that the people we work with, the people back home in your offices, are having problems right now. We're having problems. What do we do with them? Hiding problems is the most anti-lean situation. It's the most anti-lean problem. We need to be finding those problems, getting them out so that we can deal with them. We want to make everyone an expert problem finder and experimenter. The slogan we always used at NUMMI back in the day was, no problem is a problem. The problems are there. If you don't see them, it's because you're not doing your job to try to find those problems. Now, if you drive down to Fremont now, you can still see the building that NUMMI was housed in. It now houses Tesla, a kind of pivot, I guess, right? The building is pivoted. If you kept driving a little further, just 10 miles further south in Milpitas, you would go by, there was a Ford factory that was always there as well. If you see that today, there's another pivot, which is the Milpitas plant is now a mall. So I hope what this means to me is I like to think about creating sustainable organizations. So I ask this question, at GM Fremont, what went wrong really? Or at any company as it fails, what really goes wrong? And it comes back to this, that it's a management system. We see all these bells and whistles, the tools, which are wonderful, but what makes it all work, the real engine, is it's a management system. It's an organizational and a personal transformation. So I think we'd all like to be lean from the start. The lean is about solving problems through continuous experimentation, always in any situation. We ask, what is our purpose as an organization? What value to create, or what problem are we trying to solve? Then we can think, how do we improve the work to be done and develop the people so they can do that work? So do startups face problems that are different from those of established enterprises? I suppose so. There's more uncertainty, greater risk, fewer resources. But does that change the basic equation? I think whether startup or established enterprise, we want to engage everyone in problem finding and continuous experimentation. We want to give everyone permission to fail and ability to succeed. It's been a great personal journey for myself. I think you'll recognize as well, the further you go with this, the deeper you go, the deeper lean will go with you. Thank you, and good luck.